can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100,000.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders like the founders of RX Bars. They end up selling to Kellogg for $600 million. You can check out the interview with Peter and how they built it up. P90X founder Tony Horton talks about how he made money as a street mime, Stormy, and that's how he made money for food and rent, is he put a hat out, do his mime thing and make money, and he went on to sell hundreds of millions of dollars of P90X. Baby Einstein founder Julie Clark sold over 30 million copies of the kids' books, but she talks about how she beat cancer twice. Really fascinating. That, much more, check out InspiredInsider.com, where all the episodes are. This episode is brought to you by Rise25, which I co-founded with my business partner, John Corcoran. Our mission is really to connect you with your best referral partners and customers, and we do that through our Done For You podcast solution, which in my opinion is the best thing I've done for my business and my life. And when I say that, Stormy, in front of my wife, she doesn't like that. So I said, besides getting married, besides kids, but really I've not seen any other way to give to someone else and to form a relationship and to profile them. And so basically we help people show up and have that conversation with their best referral partners, clients, and we do everything else. Put it across all the different channels, all the podcasting channels, social media, etc. We do have a greater purpose for what we do, and we discovered, John and I don't know if, when you talked to John, he talked about this, but my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor who escaped Nazi Germany, and his brother and him were the only people to survive the entire family. And John, at the same time, his grandfather was a B-17 captain and pilot who flew 35 missions over Nazi Germany. So to honor our grandfather's legacy, we have a veteran entrepreneur scholarship. So if you go to rise25.com/mission and you know a veteran entrepreneur, you are one, you can apply. And what that is it gets you a ticket, sometimes all expense paid trip to a VIP event that we're running, or a ticket to the conference we're going to, or whatever it is. So go to rise25.com/mission. I'm excited to chat to today's guest, Stormy Simon, and she is former president of Overstock.com. She joined in 2001 during the formative years of e-commerce, and at the time, revenue was less than $20 million with a staff of under 100 people. And in her career, she's got a really interesting, amazing career trajectory. And I'm just talking Overstock, and we'll get into some of the background, but gone from executive assistant to VP of branding to VP of customer care to CMO to eventually president. And during her tenure, Overstock became a top 25 e-tailer by traffic and grew to nearly $2 billion in revenue and had approximately 1,600 employees. So it's amazing. And during her presidency, a more impressive thing is the female seats at the executive table increased to 33%. And it's really underserved, Stormy, and even the events that we are at or we go to or we run, we feel like it's really underserved. The female entrepreneur is underserved in that. And in 2016, she stepped down as president of Overstock to explore the emerging cannabis industry, which is booming. So follow whatever Stormy does, because whatever she's doing tends to be a hockey stick up and to the right. So she's exploring the cannabis industry. She serves on the advisory board for Canna Kids and is director on the board of High Times. She was even, I was reading, announced one of the 2019 Women Weed honorees. And in the past, she was named by Utah's Women Tech Council Top Innovator, and she was named Power Player by the National Retail Federation. Stormy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
There's so much to talk about, but I figured you'd give people a sense of, and anyone who hasn't listened to your TED Talk, by the way, needs to listen to it. I probably listened to it 3 times at this point, and talk about the evolution of your jobs starting from high school forward.
Yeah. Well, my very first job was Taco Time. And I loved it. I was 15. You were supposed to be 16, but I was 15. I wanted to start working. We didn't have a lot of money to buy school clothes or a lot of extracurricular activity for all the kids. So there weren't a lot of us. There were 4. relatively speaking, in Utah. There were only 4 of us in my family. But, so it was like, try to go to work as soon as you can. And my first job was taco time, and I learned a lot just at that. Not long after, I became a mom. And so I took a little time out.
Was this in high school or right after high school?
It was the senior year of high school. Yeah, it was that year. I had stopped going to the traditional high school and was going to a mommy school-ish. I call it mommy school. It was a great setup for, people in my situation or folks where traditional high school wasn't working. Okay. So, I went to that. And then, I moved around a little bit, worked at a Peter Piper Pizza in Arizona. And I have a food thing. Like, food is not a good industry for me to work in. I worked at the Hard Rock Cafe once as a sales director that we'd get to, but once I was touching the food, I found it really hard to eat at restaurants. And I will say that everywhere I worked was super clean and stuff, but, it had to be. I'm not meant to touch food. It's really weird. So I figured that out pretty young. And went on. I took this really interesting job. It turned out to be interesting across the street from where I lived in San Diego, which was at a video store. So back when the video to home, right, you're used to going to the movie, and all of a sudden we can rent these videos in our home. I worked at one of those stores. It turned out to be a really good move. Later, when I had moved back to Utah and I was going to the community college, I took a job at a video distribution company because it turned out Salt Lake City was a hub. So there were 3 of them there, and I took a job, for the summertime in between quarters to go be a receptionist for $6.50 an hour. And I got in there, and it was really a fun environment. It was kind of I had worked in an office before, but this was like my first prominent position. And what happened was, on about my 4th day there, I sat in front of this little wall as the receptionist, and you could roll your chair back and look behind the wall at all the people, So I got a call for someone, and I didn't know if they were on their phone, so I rolled my chair back to look, and I was like, hey, Angela, or whoever. And my chair flipped over, and I was like in a dress, and it was a minute, and I think those situations are always really funny, so I found myself laughing. The next day, the boss pulls me in, and he says, you handled that situation really well. Like, you were laughing, and most people would have been, embarrassed or something. But there was, it wasn't my fault that I fell. And he asked me if I wanted to be his executive assistant because his assistant was leaving at the end of the week. So that particular job took me into a company with 5 branches, a headquarters in Houston, and I got this real insight into how businesses are structured. It was back in the day where you'd go in and meeting with your boss and take notes, and so I was in 5 presidents from these branches were in a meeting, and I just started understanding. It was the first time where I was in a business where I was like, oh, I get it. Like, this is how it connects and works. And I was looking at,
you're
financial
flying the wall
statements.
and absorbing everything as it's going.
Yes, but I was a part of it because of that position. Being the executive to the president assistant to the president was a great position, and I loved it. Through that, I stayed in that industry, joined another company, moved up. Started doing co-op advertising where I was writing the radio spots for the regions, for these movies that were coming out in multitudes of video stores. We're not talking like Blockbuster. It was way before Blockbuster. So everybody was this entrepreneur, similar to what Cannabis is today, actually. Everybody was just popping up their shops and making it work, and then it started consolidating, and then you got the big guys then. I worked there, but that job, writing those spots and being media buying across the Western United States, led me to being the promotion director for Salt Lake City radio station.
What did media buying look like at that time? Like, now it would obviously be like Facebook ads or Instagram ads. What was it like then?
It was literally calling your regional rep for, the radio stations, which, by the way, weren't consolidated yet. They were all independent mom and pop radio stations. And so just well, you actually didn't have to call them. They were constantly calling you. It was an influx of folks once they knew you had money. And you would literally get your schedule on paper. We weren't emailing and stuff. It was the old school days, and then you'd make your buys, and you just divide your budget. It was spying and selling radio or buying media ads for probably 150 different stores across, the Western United States. So it was pretty broad.
What was next?
From there, I went to the radio station, local here in Utah, Cable 93, and it had just launched, and I joined as a promotion director. It was really interesting when I entered that job. I had zero idea what that even meant. I didn't even know what a promotion director was, and they had just changed from old classic rock to country. So listeners were mad, and there was all this changing in management. So I was promotion director with a bunch of interim managers, and I had no idea what that job was. And then I was trying to figure it out. And then a couple months in, thank God, the morning show asked me to join them as a producer. So I went on air and started and learned how to actually produce a radio show. But it was another transforming industry at the time, because when I joined, we were putting like CDs into the computer for our spots and our music. But when I left, it was all digital and all online. So everything, all our gigs that we were recording and our comedy routines, we were doing it on the computer and editing it differently than when I started. So it really had transformed. The other thing that happened on my way out was the consolidation. Like, I worked with Citadel Communications, and they had just started gathering. I might have tried a little harder in radio had I known that XM and, players like that were going to emerge. But once I got fired, because we got fired, I didn't want to go back into radio. I felt like it would take me around a lot. I was a single mom. I didn't have the luxury of just going from city to city. And that led me in destination management. And I worked for a local Salt Lake City organization that handled groups from 15 to 15,000. So we would put on conventions, do large events, tours, anything that a convention might need. And so I worked for them for a while as the director of their convention staffs. And then I went to the Hard Rock Cafe for 3 months. And, I've got stories, within here about these bosses, but this one was funny, but I won't tell it.
Now you have to tell it.
I do? Do you want me to tell it? It's kind of I'll tell it. Okay, so the guy, this is right before the Olympics, or maybe it was right after. The Hard Rock Cafe had opened in Salt Lake City. It was a huge deal, and I had been in destination management and events, so I developed this relationship with them. We did a lot of events there, and they asked me to come on as sales director. And that seemed like a wonderful idea. They've got all these locations. How great would it be? Went to the training, came back. And the guy that I worked for, it was really an old school, not old school, but it was all men. And there were just, the GM and then the restaurant managers, however that worked. But they would have these management
like an old boys club type of thing.
Yeah. They would have management meetings, and I wouldn't be invited. And then, but as the sales manager and the numbers, and I didn't know it was being reported, but this was immediate. I was there 90 days total, if that. I know it was within the 90 days. And one day, I had interviewed like the people that would greet you, and there was this woman that came in, and she was a little rounder, but she was totally funky. She had this infectious laugh. She was hysterical. And, we prided ourselves in being able, because we were a Hard Rock Cafe, you could hire people with different colored hair, and you could, and everyone met this woman, and they all thought she was warm and sweet and funny, like just fun. And it was my choice. And I went to the guy and said, this is my choice. Everyone's met her. They all loved her. And he said we couldn't hire her because she wasn't aesthetically, visually pleasing enough. So I said, obviously what? Might have dropped some swear words, probably not appropriate, but I did. I couldn't believe it. And he said, you just can't have somebody answering the door that isn't really pretty. And in Utah, you can find all these people. And I said, I don't remember the argument in specifics anymore, but then he said to me, well, do you think you would have been hired had you not been attractive? I think my next word started with an F, and the last one was you, and then I walked out the door. And so I'm not sure if I quit or was fired, but that's how the Hard Rock Cafe went, which is shocking. I mean, they're a great organization. The people there are great, but that was my one experience with the guy in Salt Lake City.
Not good.
Yeah. But it is it is what it is. I don't know who replaced me, but I hope she was stunning, or he was stunning. After Hard Rock, I moved to Vegas. I actually did another restaurant job here. It's like a startup restaurant, and I can't work with food. I moved to Vegas for a startup, and September 11th happened. And I moved home. I moved in with my mom and was like questioning everything. I had 3 months of money that I could use, and probably get into a place and live with my mom. And it was winter time, and I just thought, I'll just hang out with my mom for a minute. And then about 2 weeks of minutes in it, I was like, I need to get out of this house and get a job. My mom and I can't hang out 24 hours a day, even though it sounds like a great thing and I loved her immensely. It was too much. And that led me to walk into a temp agency. And that was the first time, I was introduced to Overstock. And went to my interview, and the next day, I think I went to an interview on one day, and the next day I went back and interviewed with Patrick, and the next day I started.
Stormy, we'll talk about Overstock, but I want to just rewind you're in high school, you have a child, okay. What were you thinking? I don't know if you were at the time, in high school before child. What were you thinking you'd want to do, when you quote unquote grew up for a living? And then did that change once you had a child?
When I was 11 years old, well, even before I was 11, but I have these memories of like sitting down and rewriting commercials on TV. And rewriting people's branding campaigns.
Really?
And,
wow.
Yeah, but it was much more simple than that, because I was like 7, and I was like, we should be. I don't even remember them. I know I had one from Oscar Mayer. I totally had an Oscar Mayer one. I know one of them, but I think I was much older. Like was a Huggies one, and there would be like I had a UPS one, and but I would just rewrite these commercials and then make my parents listen to me tell them what the commercial should be. So I think somewhere in there was some sort of dream, like an insight into how my brain worked. As I got older, I would almost play secretary, where I was like, someday I'm just going to type, and I'm going to have a briefcase. And, so I dreamed of looking like a certain woman, and wearing pump shoes, like high heels, and but not knowing what that meant. In my mind, it meant secretary, really, as a little girl. Like, one day I'll be like, Mrs. Wahiggins on the Carol Burnett show. I don't know what made me think her. But that's what I thought of. And then as I got into high school, I was a rebel. I got to say, I was not an easy one to contain.
Rebel, what do you mean by rebel?
Just the traditional the traditional high school, and the traditional learning, and it just, I always felt like shaking it up. That's how I felt in high school, is kind of confined, I guess, but always, I was raised in a very conservative place. So I think that kind of made me a little more rebellious, just wanting to be, because I couldn't be accepted in that certain group, that was predominant. So I kind of had to be another way, but I love the way I am. I love my rebellion, and it was super fun. But I think in high school, I was more exploring like life, like just being free and really feeling like I could do what I wanted. That's how I felt. So, as far as aspiring to what I was going to be, I felt like, I had a marketing mind. That's what I knew. All the classes I liked were marketing, the creative things I liked. I liked numbers, I liked math, but I didn't have passion in it. So I feel like that was my path, regardless if I was thinking about it.
Once you had a child, I have 2, and I feel like it's not easy at any point necessarily in your life, and I would think especially at that point it's not easy, in general. What how did that change your path, and what was going on at the time when you had your first child at that time?
Well, so I really believe this was my path, right? I think it had to happen the way it happened, or certain things wouldn't have happened. But I felt so grown up, like I said, I really felt like I could do what I wanted. I felt like, I could. And so I felt grown up, and I wasn't ever afraid, for whatever reason, but people were saying like, this will ruin your life. You're not going to be able to do the things that you wanted. And to me, that just didn't resonate. Like, of course I'm going to do what I want. Maybe I'm just that self-centered, but of course.
I prefer determined than self-centered, but yeah.
Well, when you're 17, it's self-centered.
Yeah.
When you're older, you could, but maybe, but I didn't even know to be determined. I was naive, but I didn't know what that meant. I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to have the baby, I'm going to get married, and I'm going to go down this path and see what happens. Now, what I really believe is, I had children young because I don't think I would have done it older. They may have been the thing that said, hey, chick, slow down. Like, you don't have to go life this quickly, slow down and ground a little bit. And that's, what I did.
And I want to talk about, you mentioned as a kid rewriting or coming up with campaigns for whatever, Oscar Mayer or UPS. And you came up with sort of something iconic for Overstock. So I want you to talk about that, and then initially what people's first impression was of what they thought it was. I'll let you unveil what that actually is, but it's catchy to say the least. So
so in my early days, I started as a temp, cold calling, B2B calls, horrible job. It was hard. That's why it was horrible. People succeed at it. They love it, and they're really good at it. I struggled with it a bit, but I found success there. I then asked if I could be executive assistant to Patrick. That was my, when I was looking at the company and I had decided to stay, there were things I could do.
Yeah. And Patrick is, for people who know, the founder, at the time, CEO.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And so these are early days, like 2002. And I really viewed, like, I had done the video distribution stuff, so I knew I could bring that online, and I did. I brought it to Overstock. And there were just so many things going on at the time. And we had a very simple dashboards, like dashboards today. When you're, managing a company and you pull up your dashboard every day and you get this influx of information, just so much. Like, what's affiliate marketing doing? What did they do in the last hour? Wait, what did they do in the last 2 seconds? And you drill down in every vertical, and it's just insane today. Back then, it was simple. And we had two numbers, outside of the revenue at the end of the day. Traffic numbers, like how many people came in through a link, right? And the links at the time were like, we had a link on the MSN homepage. That's how far back this is, before Google. So how many people came through clicks, and how many people typed overstock.com, right? So eventually I'm pulling that up every day, and I start doing the ratio of the traffic. And the truth is, it held consistent. And so it's like, that's interesting. And then I did some research on .com, the bubble bursting, and all of the money that was thrown into branding, and on, the Super Bowl commercials and Life Minders and all that stuff. I read it all, did as much research as I could. At the time, I think there was only one .com person advertising on TV, and that was Priceline. And they had worked with a company that bought remnant advertising. So this is all what I'm looking at. I looked at these numbers, and I had the thought, and I started researching all of this stuff. Yeah. So I get to this agency. Then eventually my thoughts are, I think I can move that other number, right? I think I can move this number, and here's how I think I can do it. So I met with the media agency first. I came up with the idea, and I pitched it to Patrick and said, I have this idea of a woman, a brunette. Like, I really did think about it. And he said, that's a good idea, but maybe we should go to some advertising agency. It's like, you've never done this before. He didn't know I had done this my entire childhood.
Right. Like, I did this when I was 7. I've been doing this for a while now.
My whole life.
Yeah.
Trust me. So, but my point was, if you remember the O, you will remember Overstock. OV, it's 9 letters, like 13 when you do the .com, and back then you had the www dot. Like, people still did that. And so that was the idea, if we can get them to remember the O. The other thing I did was look into purchasing 1-800 the Big O as a phone number, and that was available, and it was a phone sex. Really
it was?
Yes, absolutely.
At the time?
Yeah.
Did you actually end up purchasing it, or?
Yeah, still the phone number.
Wow.
Call 1-800 the Big O right now. Customer care will answer.
So how did that work as far as approaching that company and buying it from them?
Someone else did it.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I feel like it was like a live at the time being used, but if it wasn't being used at the time, maybe it wasn't and it had been used before. But anyway, we had to get it from someone that owned that stuff.
So at the time, was Overstock.com selling sex-related products, or no?
Oh my gosh, no!
Because I would think that all those people calling in would be very disappointed, thinking they're calling the previous hotline, and then what do you have? At least they can sell them something. Like, well, we have this sex line product line that you can go, oh, well, tell me about that. I don't know.
No, we didn't.
Not at the time.
No, not at the time.
Shoot.
It was so early. We were still pretty much Overstock goods. So he said, let's get some advertising agencies that do this for a living and see what they come up with. So we did. We reached out to 4 or 5 of them. We got all the pitches, and each one gave you about 5. We picked the best one from each of them. But honestly, at the time, you could have inserted any brand name into the pitch. And we were unique. We're different. We were so different.
Their pitch didn't stick out.
No, it wasn't like, it could have been FedEx or Macy's or, could have been anybody. And so we took in June of 2003, took it to the board and pitched the 5 or 6 ideas, and discover the secret of the Big O was one of them, right? So I was
Yours was thrown in.
Mine was also thrown in, the professionals, imagine a woman sitting in a white background, and I chose white because I knew the budget was going to be low. We'd already said I got $40,000, just pennies to do this. And so the only way to do that was with the white background, which I think was the first one, the first commercial that had a completely white background. But it was written out just like everybody else's, and they liked it. They chose mine. And so that was the beginning. And they didn't know it was mine.
Discover the secret of the Big O. That was the tagline.
Have you discovered the secret of the Big O? I remember the whole commercial. I think I could probably recite it. Wrote that thing over and over again in my head. Had to find the actress. After that, I was watching Bill O'Reilly, and I saw the woman doing a commercial on female incontinence. And I was like, what is she saying? I was so engaged that I knew that was the woman. It was like, she's talking about female leakage. I mean, she actually said those words during the commercial. And I'm thinking, you're the best, Yeah. It's that crazy. Tracked her down. It was a Kimberly Clark product, had to get down. It took me about 3 days to find her agent.
Right.
Found her agent, referred me to 3 directors. Found the director that would make a bet with me. Please I think he won awards for this, but, please just bet that this might be, if this works, I'll hire you forever. And that was the truth. We used him almost exclusively until I left, the same director. But, we did it on a shoestring. I did it on a shoestring, wrote the script, finished it while we were sitting on the set. It was discovering the secret, and people did. And we skyrocketed.
Yeah. What happened after that? with the company?
Well, we were big. We were in a couple $100 million at that point. It, was that commercial aired in October of 2003, and over the course of the next 18 months, we were at 500 million. It was triple-digit growth, and it was compressing, the systems that were built, right? Because you started your .com company with like, hey, wouldn't it be great? But your technology wasn't prepared for what happened next. These were guys, the beginning of the internet isn't, software as a service and, we have these mods that we plug in. No, it's a long line of spaghetti code that created something great, right? So, but when it gets pressured, now everybody's like, guess what we learned in the internet and retail? Agile, little bits at a time, because the technology started rolling out so fast, the solutions that came, but we had to make a tough decision on, an ERP that almost took the company down at the same time. So as a result of this massive quick growth that was, pressuring all of our legacy systems, and you could see you had to scale, the decision was made to put in the Oracle ERP system, which almost collapsed the company.
Why?
Implementation. Well,
because it was so expensive.
Well, there's press releases about this.
Yeah.
We did a horrible implementation. It was a horrible implementation.
Yeah.
Like, people lost their jobs at the time. It was what should have been, come to find out. I was the whistleblower on this whole thing, internally, by the way, because things were breaking. Turns out that this should have been an 18-month project that, the technical, whoever's in charge, thought we could get done in about 4 months or something ridiculous. But, so we were trying to do the impossible. And it was impossible. Now, in the end, it all worked out. It took the time that, they suggested. It really does take that long, but it all worked out. But yeah, the $100 million, the stress on the organization, when you're switching technologies and stuff,
huge
you don't
stress.
Growing at you're growing and you've got to make a move. You've got to be super careful and more than surgical hands, because this is customer data. It's so precious. And especially at that time, people weren't as concerned. You didn't have these protections. It was a different world. Mm-hmm. And that's what Discover the Secret of the Big O catapulted to the Oracle ERP. And then we pulled out pretty good in about 2006 and 2007.
What was, Stormy, the evolution of some of the products when you were there that you guys actually sold, and then when you were president?
Yeah, we had when I began, it was true Overstock. And you had Amazon, eBay, and really the Overstock never came to those as big as them as far as their revenue or, whatever they did. At the time, those were the players. And it really, you had books, you had auctions, and you had goods. But the goods that we had were whatever was for sale, right? The true liquidation world. And honestly, e-commerce took away the ability, Overstock, what Overstock was founded on, that idea of liquidation goods, e-commerce dissolved that, right? Because these goods were no longer on a shelf. They're sitting in another click away on sale under the merchandiser's umbrella. So he doesn't even have to liquidate through another channel. But at the time, that's what it was. So we would have pots and pans, we would have vacuums, we would have things that nobody else was touching. And, UPS, all of that, it was just another thing. It wasn't these massive, logistics companies like e-commerce has made them today. Mm-hmm. But that's how we got into couches and, big rugs. In 2001, Overstock was named Rug Retailer of the Year. It's an insane time to be that. When you're an online retailer selling rugs online, think of the shipping or trying to get that to your doorstep in 2001. It wasn't easy. Yeah, those were the things. So we figured out those things early because we had to adapt to whatever came in the door. Like, we bought a jewelry company and we have all these diamonds coming in. Okay, we need a jewelry cage. We need this equipment. We need all of these things to support it. And by those random purchases, we eventually had departments. Like, guess what? We can touch diamonds anytime now. We have the means to move them through. We kept our merchandise, almost 100% our own. And over the course of time, as we started developing partners, visiting manufacturers' warehouses, helping them ship, helping them pack, teaching them about e-commerce, selling them on the dream, we could not take their inventory in our warehouse and teach them to ship out of theirs. The consumer versus to, the RC Willys and Furniture Marts of the world. And, it started catching on. Apparel, we would always have to buy online. That was a slow industry to, really get into e-commerce, even if they have yet. And that's how we evolved and started building these departments. We were the first in furniture and had those relationships first. But Overstock became really the first multi-department store online to where it was really multi-departments. And it was by chance, because of how we, because of our name, Overstock. We'll come buy your goods. But it really did allow us to do many things, because once you built the back system for it, you could do it forever. Once you built the idea of customer service around it, you might as well just keep doing it forever, because the learning curve was expensive there.
What was the toughest part about being president? I mean, there's 1,600 employees. That seems daunting.
I would say, like at the time when I became president, take that back. When I became president, the CMO was also moved to another project. I think it was along the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency side of our business. He was moved to that. And it took us quite a while to backfill that. So the first months of and back to the point that I had to go back and ask him to take over, because it was too hard to be a brand new president and also go in as CMO again. That was a really tough time. It was hard. Those are both massive jobs, and it was tough to take. Now, what I should say is before I became sole president in 2014, I became co-president in 2013. And so I had a partner that had marketing for that the first little bit. And in 2014, he was demoted, and I was made sole president and then had to take on marketing as well. That was a tough time. Once I backfilled those positions with super great people, I would say the toughest time was trying to unravel. We talk about the tech, but it was still, even though it was 2014, still the technology that is built, that you now have way better options for, you need to transfer. It's the best thing you can do is transfer. It's expensive and it's difficult. And it was a job nobody wanted to take on. But when I became president, it was the first thing I wanted to do, because I knew it. I knew in the end that saves money, and I knew it's the hardest thing we were ever going to have to do. So I used to tell people, we're just building Rome next to Rome. Like, in the old days, they just built Rome on top of Rome. We don't have that luxury. We have to actually build it next to it and move all the people over to the new Rome as it's happening. And so that was hard, but rewarding. So rewarding to complete those connections and, know that the technology is agile and flexible, and, that's a good feeling.
Now, you obviously worked closely with Patrick, who's the founder of Overstock. Why don't you talk about, he had a vision of this online thing before most people did, and also before consumers were even fully trusting, online. What did you see, working closely with him, as some of the lessons or some of the things that you saw as far as his vision went?
I think in the beginning, when I go back to those beginning days, I think there was a lot of moments where Patrick never dreamed that he would be attached to the organization as long as he was. That in much of the business world, people acquire companies to flip companies. That's a lot of what's going on. Folks buy companies, but they never think, I can't wait to run it. They don't want to. They buy them and they sell them. They optimize them and sell them. Now, e-commerce is an addicting at the time it was addicting, right? Because you were really on a blank whiteboard. You couldn't call somebody and be like, hey, what's your services? I'm building a company and I need some customer care equipment like you can now.
Right.
Because, okay, we've got a bunch more customers. You had to figure it out. How do you market online? Those were questions. I started the marketing department. We were 3 people, and we just went and sat in a room and went, okay, we're the marketing department. What's our spend? What do we do? What is current? And then what are we building? So I think for Patrick, it was a lot of discovery along the way because nobody knew when we were there exactly what the vision was or if people were going to adopt it or what the environment was going to be and how it would really evolve out of overstocked merchandise. But yeah.
No, I was going to say, we don't have to go too deep into it, but Patrick has been in the news as of late. And you will probably do a better job of explaining what is in the news. You don't have to comment your opinion on it, but some of the things that I don't know, who knows what's true and what's not, but some of the things that's going on currently.
Yeah, pretty hot topic as of the past week. I can talk about, I left in July of 16. So that's, I left the board in September of 16. So that's where, my Overstock journey absolutely ends. Patrick's events as of late, speaking about his relationship with Maria Butina and, connections or belief in political espionage that was happening regarding the Clinton investigation and the Russia investigation. And that's what the core of it is. Now, have I read the articles? Yeah, of course. I mean, yes. I look for the meat, I'm still, like everyone, reading and waiting for things to unravel or unroll or whatever is to happen next. I think that, it's been an interesting intro and, the guts of which he's definitely, while on his news interviews, which were pretty rampant that day, he was dropping breadcrumbs. That's how I viewed it. There's breadcrumbs being dropped. And, eventually, hopefully a hen comes along and pecks them all up and we finally, the story or however that works. But or Hansel and Gretel come along and pick them up. But, that's where it's at. I think it's complicated. It's complicated no matter what way you slice it. The company, people view the company in different ways because some people view it as a a blockchain company supporting cryptocurrencies and all of these different, portfolios within Medici. And some people are really liked retail and they say, no, this was what happened to Overstock. And I think that that's a complicated story too. Mm-hmm. So there's many complications when you talk about Overstock.
Yeah.
And, Patrick layering this on top of it is surprising.
Yeah. So let's talk about cannabis for a second. How did you get involved with Cannakids?
Well, when I decided to leave Overstock, I was watching Colorado. I really was, thinking about this time in our history that was starting to be written, barely words on paper about the end of a prohibition. And that caught my eye. I am a cannabis supporter. I don't shy away from that anymore. I don't think it's made me a bad person ever. And it hasn't made any of my friends a bad person. And, I know a lot of people that cloak it. But, I raised my hand for it. I was on LinkedIn one day. It really happened just like this, February 2016. I'm on LinkedIn. I was riding with someone, we're driving, and I was talking about this cannabis industry. And they go, why don't you look to see what jobs are out there? And I said, that's brilliant. Go on LinkedIn, type in cannabis, sponsored ad comes up. It's like COO president of a cultivation center in Denver. I open it. I'm like, oh, that sounds apply with profile. Click. Didn't think about it. They call back. I'm like, well, actually, I think I don't know, it was like June. And I said, just give me some time because I knew, what I was doing. And in July, I called back and we totally worked it out. And I started there in September, about 20 days before I came off the board of Overstock, which I kind of just love that there's a crossover because people at the time were putting cannabis and such a stigma on it and how terrible it was and how, I can't tell you the number of times I heard, well, it's illegal. That's why you don't do it. It's illegal. But I did it anyway. And I went to a grow. I had other people also saying, no, wait, there's some people going to make some investments. Come join the echelon. Come join the echelon. I couldn't wait to go get my hands dirty with the plant to really get the scoop on what is happening. So I joined a place. They had a 90,000 square foot grow, which is huge. But I was coming from 1 million square feet of warehouse space, so I thought it was tiny. And managing it came easy to me, and the supply chain and how some efficiencies and just looking at it a little differently. But I stayed there for 6 months. They had 2 medicinal dispensaries, which were amazing because I met patients and I really started learning about not only the care of this plant and the growth and what goes into it, because it's a lot. Growing this plant, more goes into growing this plant under state regulations than goes into growing any of the food that you're eating. Just so you know, it's safer as far as pesticides, anything than any food you can eat. Safest. So there's a lot more going into this, right? Mm-hmm. I learned all of that. And 6 months in, after an offer of equity in the position, I had learned so much about medicine. I'm getting to Canna Kits now. That I was kind of panicked about the way that the political system of the early days in the 30s had suppressed this plant and the reasons that it did so. And I went kind of deep into the history of the plant and all the things that have happened to it and the reasons why. And it really turned me toward a medicinal course because I had joined, I really thought recreational was, going to be the big thing. And I really am an advocate for recreational or adult use is the new term. But I really think that we should own the plant, not pharmaceutical companies. However, the research on medicine is leading the way. And I met Tracy Ryan, whose daughter was diagnosed at 8 months with a brain tumor. The thought of chemo really terrified this family with this little baby. And they went for alternative options. And she, she'll say she woke up and kind of just got a message that she should look into cannabis. It wasn't, she didn't know. And she started looking and, did the really hard job of experimenting with your child. But one thing that she knew for sure was no matter what happened, that cannabis was going to be was safer than chemo. So even if it didn't work, it wouldn't harm.
Right.
In this case, it worked. And it just gives me chills, right? It worked. And it works for many children. And for Tracy at the time, early 2016, California hadn't gone recreational yet. There were all kinds of things and even medicinal, the laws were way out of control in California. They've been tolerated for so long that I just wanted to help her. Canna Kids by name is a controversial subject, and 3 years ago, even more so. But in 2017, I joined her advisory board, so I start talking about it and, getting the attention that we need for this plant on children. And the idea that a mom and dad, with the help of people who have continued to study this plant underground for years, with the help of them, they were actually able to create a medicine that was providing results, and not just for Sophie, but for many people. Many people to me can be 3, 4. It's enough, if it works for 5 and fails on 500, that's a great story for 5.
Yeah, totally.
So, but this was
especially something that doesn't have like a negative side effect, right? So even if it, like you were saying, if she takes it, worst case, nothing happens. Best case, it helps.
Yeah, I had these conversations about people when, I first started talking about this, and they would say, yeah, well, what do you think about you're getting a child high? And I get really caught up on that. And what I point out is all the videos on YouTube of kids getting their wisdom teeth out, or they're going to the dentist and they're all drugged up. They're drugged up. They're high. They're high.
Yeah, you could watch the YouTube videos of the kid in the back seat right after he got something pulled, and it goes viral because he's acting like drunk.
Their parents are laughing, and it is funny, but we're not taught. Why doesn't that not have a stigma? That is getting our child high. It's needed,
right?
They have to, but there's no stigma attached to that. That's okay because someone told us a long time ago that dentists can do that, but everybody said, but the plant doesn't work. Now, what if a plant could provide the same numbing, not just this plant, but a plant that we know is good for our child? That, maybe they act a little goofy, but chemically it's doing okay. Why is it that a child, God help us, that if they're sitting there with cancer, that we can give them something that makes them laugh? Maybe that's a joy, and help them with their pain and fight cancer cells and boost your CBD, your endocannabinoid system, and do all of those things. Getting them high should be the least of our questions. We give our children all kinds of synthetic drugs, and they're needed. I don't want to mom shame, pill shame. None of that applies here. These are our children. We take care of them. They need to function in a very high stress society. These children will have more stress than you and I have ever dreamed of because they're getting information at 9 months old. They're learning to swipe a phone. They're pushing what icons appeal to them at 9 months old.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to cope, right?
Yeah.
But increase in Ritalin.
It's true. Yeah, there's totally.
And these kids are under stress. Their lives are exposed. They're constantly on Facebook. They're fine sending videos. It's the most interesting thing we're going to see, but it doesn't make it healthiest.
Yeah.
But we're really caught up on cannabis. You know what I mean?
I suggest anyone go to cannakids.org, and then there's a tab. You can read Sophie's story, and it's pretty remarkable of her journey.
It just gives me chills every time I talk about it. I've talked about it for years, but it still does.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it off the side here, but when you can induce something that's more natural for someone that helps their body heal itself is always, more beneficial if you can do that as opposed to something else, Well,
and we should say Sophie is on chemo and traditional therapies.
Yeah. She didn't abandon one to replace one. Mm-hmm. She did both at the same time.
Right, and they've done things where she comes off of the cannabis for a little bit, and they watch the tumor. So, she's got doctors involved. There are hospitals involved.
Yeah.
This has now entered a very balanced, beautiful type of research where, nobody's saying chemo should be thrown out the window. That is never anybody in cannabis's story. It's like it should be included. It should be included as an option and as a medicine, and maybe the first step before, you zap your body if you need to.
They have some products. What are some of the popular ones for cannabis?
The tinctures. The tinctures are always good, and you really consider them for pediatric and geriatric because of the ability to sublingually, soak under your tongue. You don't have to swallow pills. It's easy to take. Anything of the CBD is great. 100% CBD. It's for everyone. These aren't just medicines for people with cancer. But when you do go to dispensaries and medicinal dispensaries as a patient, folks, the bud tenders there are pretty well versed in talking to you about it because I know there's this moment where Cannabis is a medicine. These products you're looking at, we consider a medicine, but they're going to be sold in a store without a doctor. And that's what I found really interesting in my early cannabis days was the people delivering the information and making suggestions about the plant to sick people. And then going back on what they say or asking them the questions and them knowing it and being fairly confident what they're saying is correct. And then the feedback from the patients comes right back to them. So it was a really interesting community. And I think Cannabis has that same sort of, place on the shelf.
What's the legality of, if someone wants to purchase something on this site, how does it work? Or how does that work as far as you have to be a certain state?
Yeah, anything with THC, first of all, purchasing online in the state of California, you can have products delivered to you, but not mailed. So you can order online, you can order things in a store, and it's really dispensary specific. So here, I honestly don't know right now if we are selling the CBD direct to consumers.
Yeah.
But anything with THC or full plant spectrum, we would be unable to ship anywhere, even in the state of California, but would only be able to sell in California.
So what do they do? They just have a courier go deliver it, or?
Well, yeah. Well, Cannabis doesn't. You have to work through dispensaries.
Yeah. Got it. So you're made aware of it through the site, but you really have to go to a dispensary to get it. I gotcha.
Yes.
So eventually your Overstock.com abilities will, and the laws match up with it, and it can actually be fulfilled easier for people.
Yes. So I walk into this industry, and I'm like, I got all kinds of artilleries for e-commerce and digital to an industry that doesn't allow any of it.
Right. They're like, check your artillery at the door for this right now. Yeah. Really interesting. Yeah, so everyone should check out cannakids.com or .org rather. It's CANNAKIDS. So tell me, what's next or now, future for you in cannabis, and if you want to talk about Tribe Talks as well and what's going on with that.
I do want to talk about cannabis just one more second.
Yeah, go
ahead. Because of that involvement that I have with the medicinal side and, the advocacy of I have against Big Pharma with this plant. On the flip side of that, I'm on the board of High Times, and that's important to me because they have been a big supporter of the plant for 45 years, but single-handedly for the cannabis community and all the farmers and the growers that were really delivering about $56 billion in a network that couldn't exist for our government. And many of them do see themselves as farmers, and many of them do see this as a medicine and have their entire career, which is sometimes third generation. That's who High Times supported them throughout all those years single-handedly when it wasn't safe. And so to be on their board was really important to me on this industry because it was my connection also and my education for cannabis growing up and my curiosities and all of that. So I serve both sides, medicinal and the idea for legal use, even though High Times does, of course, support medicinal progress. Research and all the conferences and things like that. But it's important that consumers remember that if we give this plant to the FDA, and that's what will happen, they will own this, and you do not have a homegrown law in your state or a recreational law in your state, just think about what that could mean for plants. Something to think about, right? Because it's a plant. I look out my door, I have some lavender. I believe lavender has healing abilities, just like I do with cannabis. I sincerely believe that has calming abilities, could start combating Xanax maybe, or certain things, right? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Don't know the research, but I believe that. Are we really sure that we want to push it strictly into the hands of the government, or do we need a hybrid of these laws? Because I pay, when I took not a lot of pharmaceutical medicines, but, when I was on my trazodone for sleep, that wasn't cheap, right? In my insurance life, I was paying maybe $30 a month, but someone else was paying $500.
Right.
That's what happens when we enter Big Pharma right now, and it's always has been. This isn't as much as it's costing in the stores. Oils, tinctures, they've been around for decades. It's just if you knew where to get them. But these medicines have been going around healing people for decades. Now, the research is being run underground. It's important. It's so important we get it done. But I also fear giving the government plants as a medicine.
Right.
There is a reason that the FDA has not approved the products that you find in your local GNC store. They're not set up to make money off it. This will be the first plant that I can think of that gets approved as a medicinal benefit and begged to be put into the pharmaceuticals' hands. And they are positioning themselves to take control of it. Now, it's a conundrum, right? And it's one I found myself in this industry. Where do I, how does this all make sense? Because it still doesn't to me. Yes, I want the medical research. I want plants as a medicine. We need to research that more as a country for our people. On the other hand, the corporate structure, which absolutely exists today and is locked and loaded and stuck with a lot of organizations, supports a synthetic, reactive medicine. We are not about being well. We are about being sick and take this. Get sick, take this. But we're not about, hey, take this and stay well.
Right.
That's what plants will do. So that is what plants can do. We learn it every day, but we can all be more diligent in being healthier, but we need to keep our voice. We need to keep our voice. I don't need permission from the FDA for marijuana, and I never have, and I don't today. But when you get past the stigma and you get past the history and you get to the heart of it, which I did, which was the beginning, and then you take away all of that and look at this as just a plant. Just a plant. It just was growing. Why does someone have to own it? Research should be done because it's best for the people, but ownership could cost a lot of money for the people. That same plant could be $5,000 next month.
So you're saying for it to get approved, it should be approved recreationally so it doesn't get taken over as much by the FDA and they hike up the price essentially.
Yeah, plants are for people. We grow celery, we grow tomatoes, we grow cucumbers. It's just a plant. You can grow hops and barley if you want. It's just a plant. You can grow a cactus. You know what I mean? And I think that idea, because, plants as a medicine were years ago, right? Before the American Medical Association, when people had brooms and were sweeping their seeds in a garden. It goes back to a paganistic world almost, where herbs were the medicine.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to, that's why they call it Eastern versus Western, right? You go to Eastern medicine, they use mushrooms and spice, turmeric and other things for healing.
Yes, and then we got into this world where, it was all just forgotten, and not only forgotten, but condemned, to where, medicine will only be this and only provided by this group, and that, it sounds simplistic, but eventually that's how it is. It's what the system is.
Yeah.
And social media, technology, and the idea that we can communicate in the broad senses that we do now has given the people the power to push their voices and what they want as a medicine and what they're finding and connecting. And saying, I had that too. Like, my child has cancer. I'm desperate. I can now find people that had success with something outside of what the only, you're walking into a doctor's office, you only get one or two choices because that's all they have. Yeah. But other countries have many. Other countries have retreats and wellness and, so it's an interesting thing to start breaking down, but geez, that's what cannabis did for me, when I got in the industry. And that's what I hope people remember, is it really is just a plant. But many plants, many of them have these same type of properties. It's not the only one with cannabinoids in them, or the only plant that provides similar assists for your endocannabinoid system. Yeah. There's many.
No, I totally appreciate you sharing that, Stormy, and you're preaching to the choir here.
I am preaching.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. To me, I totally, am on, the sense of the system and what people's mindset and paradigm around quote-unquote healthcare is not really healthcare. It's sick care, and it's great for sick care. It's great for if there's a major issue, but for keeping people well, it's not equipped. You know what I mean? And it's totally, so you're preaching to the choir here. And things are, I think, people are becoming more aware. They're becoming healthier. Their mindset in general is changing to, wow, like eating food can keep me healthier and keep me well. And they're going towards more of a wellness mindset than, I'll just take this pill when something happens. Well, not thinking of the cause and then preventing it. So, totally,
and pointing out that all of that movement has not been done by our government or our FDA or the American Medical Association. it's been done through people learning and sharing their experiences on social media. But there's no campaign about, hey, world, I'm the American Medical Association and I got something to share with you. Here's all the stuff we learned about everything that's going to make you healthy this year. Here's everything we know about medicine for you to make you better.
Yeah. It's a lot of documentaries and people sharing, like documenting their journey. So Tribe Talks.
Oh, Tribe Talks. Yes. So all these stories, and even the last one where I did absolutely preach, has led me to want to create a platform to where these real stories are shared. I think a lot of the cannabis news right now is $4 billion going into one company, or this investment or this merger, and it is all about the big business, and that's what most of the people hear about. But underneath it all are some amazing, not only beautiful stories, but unfair stories. The social justice connected with this plant is still being addressed. I commend all the governors that are really just saying, look, we're going to go legal and we're going to just write off and expunge everybody's records. It gives me chills. Like, please be fair. And but you hear these stories, people that can't work in the industry because they had a joint on a corner 20 years ago, things like that. But also the stories of the moms and the people that have been doing it for many years, and those that, have had great successes too, the big money too. But it's time to really let the tribe talk. And my tribe is comprised of cannabis folks, very successful. One is a woman that Autumn Carsey, who builds large grows. She's almost an architect, and she grows some of the best cannabis with the best care and knowledge and science. And she came up scrappy, and she's amazing. And one of the only women I know doing it in the business. Joshua Crosney is the Cannabis Science Conference. And so he's put on the only cannabis science conference in the business, and that's been a huge source of education for me. And then Leah Heiss, who is a compliance attorney for one of the larger brands, and comes to us. She was on disability for 12 years before cannabis entered her life. And now she is a top player in the industry, and she takes on a lot of stress, and she's working full time. But before cannabis, she wasn't. She was 12 years at home. And that's the tribe. So not only do the tribe have their own stories, but, we have the ability to really get the right stories to folks and talk about it. And, maybe in the sense of a daily show or, The View or something where it's a lot of fun too.
Where can we, first of all, Stormy, thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for sharing your views and the work you've done already in the cannabis industry and will continue to. Where should we point people towards? Online?
Yeah, the Tribe Talks will launch October 1st is our hopeful launch date. And then online, I'm on Facebook, Stormy Simon. What do they call them? A business page, business profile, or whatever that's called, a secondary one. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty, accessible. I love connecting with people and listening to their stories or checking them out, whatever it is.
So people can go to, is it tribetalks.com or what's the?
Tribetalks.com will be the website.
Got it.
The Tribe Talk, it's actually thetribetalks.com, The Tribe Talks on Facebook.
Got it.
Each one right now is a holding place, and we're looking to get those up by October 1st.
So go to thetribetalks.com, and I do encourage everyone to listen to Stormy's TED Talk. You can find that on YouTube. Maybe it's on her site somewhere. Check out cannakids.org. And Stormy, I want to be the first one to just thank you.
Thank you so much. I have enjoyed this so much. Thank you for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.